Legal kidnapping or justified separation? Join me as I take a deep dive into the darker side of CPS. Hey guys, first off, I have a trigger warning for you all. If things like SA, violence against children, corruption, kidnapping, if any of that triggers you in any way, please skip this video. All of the information I gathered for this video is available online, available to the public. I do voice my opinion in this video, and it is just that. It is only my opinion. I encourage you all to share your opinions with me. I love getting comments from y'all. But this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So if you're ready, let's dig in. In the words of former Georgia State Senator Nancy Schaefer, CPS has become a protected empire. It's legal kidnapping, yet at times they'll fail to remove a child enduring real torment. Prior to her passing in 2010, Senator Schaefer worked on a report with parentalrights.org. The report was titled, "The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services." They interviewed 42 families for the report, 11 of which alleged that their children were either physically abused, SA'd, exposed to drugs, or some other type of harm was caused while being in the, quote, system. The system is broken, plain and simple. Question is, how do we repair a broken system? Or we just wash our hands at the whole CPS division and replace it with a more efficient and more regulated system? And Senator Schaefer uncovered some very troubling facts. One county in Georgia had a private drug testing business operating within the agency, and they required many unnecessary drug tests from people for profit. After being exposed for corruption, she witnessed several employees getting fired, only to be either rehired in a different county or even back into that very same office. She was convinced there is no responsibility and no accountability in CPS. And she concluded that the poor parents were often targeted to lose their children because they don't necessarily have the means to hire a lawyer, or they don't usually fight the system. Nancy stated parents are at times victimized by the systems that make a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children to their parents. Caseworkers and social workers are often guilty of fraud or withholding and destroying evidence and fabricating evidence. Yet when charges are brought against CPS, they're often ignored. While doing my own investigation, I came across several cases of children either being hurt by foster families or abused by the system. And each one of these stories have broken my heart. I'm going to share some of the stories with you to give you an idea of where things in the system are broken or lacking. We as a community have far more power than we give ourselves credit for. And as Helen Keller once said, alone we can do so little, yet together we can do so much. And I just want to state that this video does not represent all CPS caseworkers or departments. I'm only bringing attention to the areas that have clearly fallen short and caused the children to suffer. The first child I want to tell you about was named Amari Varela from New Mexico. Born to a drug-addicted mother in prison, Amari had a life filled with pain. Multiple reports to Children, Youth, and Family Department throughout the years, police visits due to domestic disturbances, and even little Amari reporting to school officials in 2012 that he'd been beaten at home by his mother. 2 days after Christmas in 2013, Amari was found at his Albuquerque home, brutally beaten with injuries to the head, chest, abdomen, back, both forearms, left knee, right shin, and tongue. He had lost over 25% of his blood volume due to internal bleeding. His body also showed signs of prior physical abuse, including burn marks and bruises. Amari's mother, Cynthia Varela, was sentenced to 40 years in prison for second-degree murder. His stepfather, Stephen Cassaws, was initially sentenced to 30 years for child abuse resulting in death, but the State Court of Appeals overturned his most serious conviction related to the failure to call 911, so his sentence was reduced to 12 years. There was a wrongful death lawsuit against CYFD, and 5 police officers were disciplined, one being fired, for failing to properly respond to earlier calls of abuse. The proceeds of the lawsuit were divided among Amari's 3 siblings. The siblings were abused as well, and they had to testify in court. And in court, they included many pictures that Amari's sister had drawn of their mother hitting Amari. But thankfully, his siblings are living safely and happily with their aunt now. Next, I'm going to talk about Brandon White. CPS received calls on Brandon since 1999. Brandon was autistic, had bipolar disorder, Tourette's syndrome, and seizures. His mother's boyfriend, Robert Gray, would tie him up in bed sheets when he had fits. CPS was called to his home 23 times. His mother even admitted to whipping him with the belt so hard that it left bruises. On January 8, 2013, Brandon died of asphyxiation after being tied up at the age of 15. Robert was convicted of murder and is serving 90 years in prison. His mother, Holly White, pleaded guilty to injury to a child and unlawful restraint and received a 10-year suspended sentence. School employees had regularly called CPS. He had shown up with black eyes, cigarette burns, bruises. There were no blankets or pillows anywhere in the home, and the cabinets only contained a half a pack of crackers and 2 packs of Kool-Aid. That's it. Yet caseworkers ruled out abuse in each case. Next is Deacon Gray. A 2-year-old was interviewed by CPS in July of 2011, and during this interview, Deacon told them that Bully, and he was referring to his stepdad, Billy, but he said Bully would hurt him. And Deacon had visible scratches and bruising on one temple. And in a later visit, he had more bruises and a cut on his lip. Deacon's brother also told the investigator that their stepdad hit Deacon in the past and that he is afraid of him. Still, they did nothing. On September 7, 2011, only 2 months after the visits from CPS, Deacon died from a severe brain injury, which came from a beating from Billy Hazel. Hazel received a life sentence after being convicted of capital murder. Then I want to talk about Eric Dean from Glenwood, Minnesota. Little Eric was beat to death by his own mother, Amanda Peltier, in February of 2013. By February, at the age of 3, there had been 15 reports made to CPS on Eric. His mother treated him differently than her other kids, grabbing him, yelling at him, telling his daycare not to show him affection because he, quote, didn't deserve it. One daycare teacher brought him a new pair of shoes after his old ones kept falling off. His mother was so outraged, she said she wouldn't give them to him until he, quote, deserved them. And in Minnesota, CPS reports must be shared with police. Yet, in Eric's case, only 1 report was shared. Alize Vick from Pueblo, Colorado. Alize was 23 months old and already in foster care, a place where she should feel safe and protected. Her foster mother, Jules Caneo, refused to feed her. She would sit on Alize to make her scream and cry, and Jules weighed well over 300 pounds. Even after a neighbor, Marion Hartman, wrote a letter to the El Paso County Child Welfare Office begging for intervention, including a recording from a baby monitor. 5 months later, October 2007, Jules threw Alize into a coffee table. She hit it head first. Apparently, she was angry because Alize wouldn't talk to her. The CPS worker had said that the recording wasn't enough to remove Alize from the home. Next is Leilana Wright. Her grandparents notified CPS of abuse and included pictures of her covered in bruises. Caseworkers deemed her safe after only one home visit. Jerry Quezada, her mother, and Charles Pilfer had been beating Leilana with a belt and a bamboo stick because she drank her brother's juice. She was killed after her mom's boyfriend threw her so hard against a wall that her body left an imprint, then bound her up and locked her in a closet. Her mother pled guilty to felony injury to a child and received a sentence of 50 years. Caseworkers failed to notice that Jerry had previous child abuse charges and had lost custody of her older 3 children. Pilfer found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Next, I want to talk to you about Devani, and this one is, they're all tragic, but this one really got to me for some reason. Devani was born April 29, 2011. 2 weeks prior to her 2nd birthday, she was taken away from a loving home by a state child welfare caseworker. And by all accounts, Devani was well fed and well taken care of. Over the next 4 years, while her mom fought to bring her home, Devani suffered a variety of mistreatment in a series of foster homes. But we'll start at the beginning, and this one's a longer one, so just hang tight with me, okay? In early April 2013, Devani's mom, Michelle Cauldron, and her dad, Jonathan Hillman, had gotten into an argument. There was allegedly no physical contact, no hitting, it was just yelling. But a neighbor overheard and called police. Domestic violence charges were brought against Michelle, the mother, but the charges were quickly determined to be without merit and were immediately dismissed. Keep that in mind. During the argument, Devani was at her grandma's, so she wasn't even at home at this time. On April 17th, just 1 day after the charges on Michelle were dismissed, a social worker by the name of Norel Elviti showed up at Grandma's house. She did not have a warrant. She did not have a court order. Yet she still removed Devani from Grandma's home. So Mom Michelle immediately went up to DCS, and she had the court documents with her to prove that all the charges were dismissed. And Elviti demanded right then and there that Michelle take a drug test. And she complied. She took it, she peed in the cup. It was a 10-panel drug screen. That means it checks for 10 different substances, and it came back completely negative. So this right then should have ended everything. Devani should have gotten to come home, but without a shred of evidence, social workers were allegedly concerned that the parents might, in the future, do something that would cause harm to their child. That is what they said. So, DCS kept Devani and placed her in one of the most horrific situations you can think of at her first foster home. DCS continued to dig into her parents' past, yet they never looked deeper into the foster homes they're placing these kids in. Michelle's prior history with drugs that had ended before even having Devani was used against her to keep Devani in the system. The courts were never informed of the fact that she had been drug-free for 13 years. And Michelle, the mom, was actually the first one to see signs of her daughter being in distress. She had bruises, scratches, bite marks. She reported all of these signs to caseworkers and supervisors, and when she got nowhere with them, she reported it to the police. Still nothing. She was placed with David Frodsham and his wife Barbara. Continued to show up with bruises, and I believe she had like thumb marks on her hips. And then she ended up with a UTI, which I'll put up there the description of that. But they're painful, and sometimes they have a smell. And Mom noticed it, and also her transporter, Beth Breen, noticed it. Now, Beth Breen told Health Impact News that Devani had grown terrified of men ever since she went into foster care, so that she was the main person that would take her to and from her visits with her mom for about a year. She testified to seeing nothing but love and excitement from Devani when she'd go to see her mom. DCS stopped her dad from being able to visit her due to his past, but on the way back, Devani would scream, kick, cry, and would be unconsolable all the way to her foster home. And just to note that Devani was never afraid of men before foster care. So that's a sign in itself. And throughout the case, Devani had a lawyer representing her best interests. And this lawyer told Devani's parents and the court that she was bonding with the Frodshams, and it would be detrimental and not in her best interest for her to be removed. And it wasn't until Mr. Frodsham showed up at DCS drunk with two of the foster kids in tow to pick up his foster care check. Then they finally removed her. And then after that is when the investigators found a video made by Frodsham of SA of a little 3 or 4-year-old girl. Another foster child that had lived with David Frodsham for 12 years sued DCS in 2018, once he finally turned 18, for $15 million, saying they failed to protect him from years of physical and SA abuse. Frodsham was sentenced to 17 years for the PD ring he ran in 2017. David Frodsham utilized the state of Arizona and the foster care system to funnel innocent and vulnerable children into his home so he could run a PD ring. This boy was not only physically hurt, SA'd, but also locked out of the house. His wife, David's wife, wouldn't buy him clothes or feed him. All of the neglect and abuse was documented by DCS, yet nothing happened. He was forced to eat hot sauce, handcuffed to beds, locked in closets, beaten with brooms, belts, and fists. The Frodshams even admitted to many of these things. They didn't hide it, yet the only thing that happened was they would get a stern warning that this is inappropriate behavior and against policy. The total of 38 police reports and multiple eyewitness accounts of abuse, and still nothing happened. As mandatory reporters, social workers are required to report abuse even at foster homes, and their failure to do so was in violation of Arizona law. Yet no one within the system has faced any charges. They never do. Maybe if they had harsher punishments or bigger consequences, just maybe they'd actually do their jobs right. And I'm sure that there are many social workers out there that do their jobs right, that actually care about these kids. I'm not discussing them in this video, and I'm sure the good ones know of at least one employee that takes shortcuts or avoids the extra paperwork. But back to Devani. Sadly, this was not the worst of what she would face. She next lived with Justin and Samantha Osteras. They actually applied to adopt her through a now closed St. Nicholas of Myra adoption agency. And according to court records, DCS was previously warned that Samantha abused drugs and was violent. And it was actually Justin's brother told Puma County detectives that he had warned the adoption agency that Samantha was dangerous and should not be licensed to adopt. But nonetheless, Devani was placed with them. On December 29, 2016, Samantha reportedly held Devani, then age 5, down in a bathtub of scalding hot water, then left her to suffer for 6 hours before calling 911. Devani was placed in a medically induced coma with third-degree burns, and she was in danger of oxygen failure and organ failure. All 10 toes had to be amputated, and she has had several surgeries and skin grafts. Investigators sent a plumber to the home and saw that the hot water heater was turned up to the max setting of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Samantha was arrested on January 5th and sentenced to 15 years in prison, followed by an additional 15 years of probation. Michelle petitioned the court to allow her to visit Devani in the hospital, but not only was the petition denied, but good old Thea Gilbert reportedly told Michelle that the only way she'd see her daughter again is if she was dying. And I mean, come on, the baby was in a medically induced coma. And you know all that she wanted was probably her mama at that time. I want to ask you if you've heard about something called Clinton's Law, as in Bill Clinton. It's cash bonuses to CPS for removing children from their homes and putting them up for adoption. Legislation provides cash bonuses to states that increase their adoptions. It's $4,000 for each child above the previous year's total, and $6,000 for each special needs child. It is called the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, which was signed on November 19, 1997. It requires that states move to terminate parental rights for children who've been in foster care for 15 out of the last 22 months. A study done by the Urban Institute Center for Social Policy revealed that AFSA failed to properly support blood relatives, meaning they didn't try to keep the child within the family, as they always say they try to do first. The number of adoptions went from 38,000 in 1998 to nearly 60,000 in 2017. Texas Tech University law professor Delith Gossett said, quote, "The Act's financial incentives have disrupted families permanently by the speedy termination of parental rights. ASFA was blamed for leaving many children as orphans, waiting for adoptions until they aged out of the program, meaning they turned 18 and were just let go to fend for themselves. And personally, as I sit and wonder about cases like Warren and Orson West, 2 boys taken from their mother and adopted out before she was given a chance to go through their programs and win custody back, or little Devani's case, where there's absolutely no evidence of neglect or abuse, yet she was unjustly taken from her parents and eventually adopted out, even though her mother was doing everything CPS had asked of her. I wonder, is this why? Money? Is it as simple as that? My boyfriend stands behind me shouting adrenochrome, but, that's another video in itself. And what do you think? Leave me your thoughts in the comments below. Clearly something needs to change. Posting petitions from change.org. Those will be in the info below. Please sign it, share it. Help make a difference. Because if we don't stand up for these children, who will? Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you for stopping by to see what I had to say. This story was especially difficult for me to research. I kept imagining my child in the shoes of whichever child it was I was reading about, and it was hard. So I can only imagine what these parents went through, the ones that lost their child when they did nothing wrong. As for the other ones, I'll just keep my thoughts to myself on that. I just feel like this is something more people need to talk about. More people need to step up and try to help. Things can change, but they're not going to change on their own. They need us to get together and make more of an effort. But thank you again for taking the time to watch my video. I would really appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up. And if you have any comments or thoughts or ideas for me, or you just want to comment on the video itself, please put it down in the comments below. I read them. I appreciate all of them. Y'all have a good night. Thank you. God bless.